I'm sure we've all at least heard about the popular Hasbro show entitled My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Am I correct? So I don't think I have to explain a whole lot about what the show is about. Hell, even if I wanted to, it would make this post a lot longer than I'd really want it to be. And also, most likely would have been a bit too boring for some people out there to read. So I'll simply cut to the chase here. For any fan of the show who would already know, Season 8 was a season that we've been introduced to what was now called the Young Six. Basically, for anybody who hasn't caught up with this season yet, the Young Six are a group of younger kids sent by various leaders of various kingdoms to learn about friendship at Twilight's School of Friendship. There's Sandbar, a colt from Ponyville, Gallus, a griffin from Griffinstone, Yona, a yak from Yakistan, Silverstream, a hippogriff from the Sea Ponies, Smolder, a dragon from the Dragon Kingdom, and finally Oscillus, a reformed changeling from Thorax's hive, once originally formerly Chrysalis's. Each of the Young Six have their own form of personality and backstory behind who they are, why they're at the School of Friendship, and the various trials and tribulations and adventures that they tend to go through on a daily basis to graduate the friendship lessons at the school. Now this is where the backstories really start to come in, as it's relatively important to the story. While it was confirmed, for a few episodes, where most of the Young Six had came from, their families and the like, the only one that never really received too much of a backstory at the time was Gallus. Well, at least until the episode Heartwarming's Eve, which is where we found out that Gallus was not only an orphan, but also had no home or family to speak of as well, outside of it. Not to mention, debunking the idea that Grandpa Gruff was actually Gallus's grandfather. I'm sure that the episode in question was a bit of a tearjerker to most fans of the show who watched the episode, especially when the ending came along and all of Gallus's friends stayed behind to not leave Gallus alone for the holidays, which in turn went out nicely and nobody really had to do any friendship lessons, although they did have to wind up cleaning up all the goo in the room. Now, with that all said, what does this have to do with what I'm about to talk about? It's simple. The original concept for the episode Hearths Warming Club was originally going to be a lot more depressing than what it originally was. To explain, from what I've managed to research on, this episode was originally going to go into further detail about Gallus's past, his parents, and the reason why he was an orphan to begin with. However, due to censors and various threats from the higher-ups from Hasbro to take down the episode entirely, the scene was later replaced and reanimated to comply with the higher-ups' demands. Now, what exactly was it that the reason for the scene's banning? Well, it varies from person to person in matters of opinion, but what is at least considered to be plausible was the fact that it was, well, a bit too graphic. No, not the gory kind of graphic, but the very nature and tone of it was definitely a lot darker and messed up than what the show normally was allowed to portray in their shows. Which is actually kind of shocking, as the show has been known to get past a couple of the censors relatively easily in the past, and not suffer any kind of consequences. Yet, for some reason, this scene was enough to nearly put the episode under. This is where I start discussing about how I managed to get the episode in hand. However, I'd rather not really mention how I managed to acquire it, as my methods were not really legal. In fact, I'd say they were a little bit more than illegal, in a manner of way of trying to get into the databases of the network, and then, well, finding what I needed to find without particularly getting caught. It took a whole lot to actually manage to get to where I needed to get at, but like I said, not gonna go into too much detail. Also, for anybody wondering, I'm not, nor will I ever show anything about this specific scene or anything with anybody else. Don't want to get tracked down and arrested. Even with my rather illicit way of getting the episode, I can still in detail describe what had gone on in it, and describe everything that it was shown in the clip. Now, the episode itself is pretty much normal for the most part. Nothing really interesting or new about this specific version of the episode, until the part where the others start fighting and Gallus pretty much shuts them all down. Once he had shut the other main five down, the others start asking him what his problem was, to which he admits that he was the person who did the deed of getting goo all over the place. The others, as expected, were rather shocked by this, but also curious to know why he did it in the first place. He explained that he did it to keep everyone together for the holidays, as he just didn't want to be alone for Hearthswarming Eve. Silverstein then proceeded to ask him about his family, and that's when the deleted scene started. "No, because I don't really have a family," Gallus said as he lowered his head down in shame. "Wait, why not? Why don't you have a family?" Sambar asked. Gallus simply sighs and lowers his head down a bit more. He looks rather upset at the question, but quickly answers. "It all started off back when I had turned 6 that year," Gallus said before a snowy transition swept across the scene and then showed a brand new scene in its place. The new scene then showed a single home in a cloud next to the other houses in Griffinstone. This house, along with many of the others, were heavily decorated with various lights and other festival-looking decorations around it. Then, after a second, a younger version of Gallus flew across the sky, which the scene followed. As the young Gallus continued to fly and doing various tricks around the place, Gallus's narration could be heard over it. "It was the first year of the New Moon Festival that my parents and I were going to celebrate together, and I was honestly very excited for it, like any little griff would be." The scene then cut to show what appeared to be Gallus's mother and father. His father, a very large and gray and yellow griffin with blue eyes and long feathers for hair, and his mother, a rather soft-colored blue and gray color stripes, and green eyes, walking out of the door and calling Gallus inside. "Coming, Mom," the young Gallus said as he flew down on it to his parents. Gallus's voice continued to narrate as a younger version of him swept into his mother and father's arms, to which they all pretty much had a small group hug. Now, while most griffins are usually rather grumpy and cold during the New Moon Festival, my parents weren't that kind of way. The two of them had every ounce of love and joy in them since the day of my birth. They didn't even have to raise their voices at me at all. Well, I mean, whenever I got into trouble, they were stern, but nothing really more than that. The young Gallus and his parents then made their way inside the home, and into the kitchen where it looked as though a couple of pies were cooking in the oven. Gallus's mother had wound up making her way over towards one of the counters, and then began stirring something in a large bowl. It was funny. To celebrate that year of the New Moon Festival, my mom was making one of her delicious mice pie. She was a really good cook, actually. Her mice pies were probably the best in all Griffinstone, Gallus said. The other characters' voices reacted with a "ew" in reaction to, what Gallus's mother had made, before Gallus then said, "Oh, come on, guys, it's actually pretty good when you give it a try," Gallus said, before clearing his throat once more and continuing. "When we had all made our way back into the house, my mother was in the process of getting more cookies made for the festival, but she quickly realized that she didn't have any milk anymore in the icebox. So she handed me some bits and then had me go out to go and get some at the store." The young Gallus then swiftly made his way out of the door and down into Griffinstone, where he began to look to and fro in various ways to try and find a store that was opened up, which most, if not almost all of them already were closed. Probably should have guessed that most of the shops would have been closed. I actually had to go to Ponyville just to get the milk that my mom needed. It took some time, but I was able to quickly make my way back to Griffinstone and back to the route to my house. The scene then cut to show Gallus swiftly making his way back home, but soon cutting himself quickly and short, and just flying there, while smoke animation hit Gallus in the face rather hard. Young Gallus then sniffed and smelled the smoke, and his eyes widened with a look of fear. When the smoke hit me for the first time, I thought it was just a few griffins burning something out of their houses, as many of them tend to do. But then I noticed the smell was nearly the same as my mother's mice pie. I quickly flew myself down to my house as quickly as I could, only to find... Gallus's narration stops, as the young Gallus soon made his way into the house. The sudden bright orange flickering that reflected off of his eyes basically said everything. But the scene then soon cut to show Gallus's home on fire, with various other griffins trying their best to put the flames out. although rather unsuccessfully. Gallus, young Gallus specifically, immediately freaked out at this and then slammed himself into the front door, breaking it down in the process, and began going into the house, trying to look around. I looked around everywhere in that burning building to try and find my parents. It was really hard to breathe in there, but it didn't take me long to find them in the kitchen, not moving. I attempted to fly myself towards them to get them out of there, but almost as quickly as I made my way there, half of the house's roof collapsed and fell, practically blocking the way. I tried to get to them numerous times, even going so far to burning my talons on the burning wood just to try and claw my way in there. But by the time I had finally managed to make myself a space to go in there, it was already too late. The other griffins had wound up coming in there quickly, found me, and then proceeded to drag me out. The scene then faded to show the young Gallus crying and begging to the others to let him go to go and save his parents, all the while calling out, "Mom! Dad!" in the process. The scene only then proceeded to cut back to the hole that Gallus had made, as flames started to spit out from the hole that he had made, and then soon faded out, to show nothing else more but a charred and blackened spot in the ground with various parts of the house still standing, although not by much. Nobody else was there except for Gallus, who simply sat there right next to the cindered ashes of the house, crying his eyes out as he made his way over towards the burnt-out lot. My parents didn't make it out of the house in time. From what I was told, they had wound up passing out or something, and the pie had caught on fire, or setting the rest of the house on fire. I lost everything that day. My parents, my things, my family, everything. The flashback then ended, and it showed Gallus sitting there, tears forming in his eyes and flowing down his face at a heavy rate. He soon broke down and cried as the flashback concluded. It then cut to show the other main five, most of which looked to be crying, as they all ran up to the griffin and proceeded to give him a rather huge, big hug. Even Smolder joined in, despite her serious attitude. Sambar was the one that held on the tightest, as I could tell. Gallus simply looked at everybody's saddened faces, wiped his eyes, and then, like in the original scene, apologized for making the mess that he did, before saying that he would go and talk with Head Mayor Twilight and admit to what he had done. However, just like what was seen now in the show, Twilight, Spike, and Rainbow Dash were already there, and admitted that they had already known that it was him, that it was Gallus that had done it. The rest of the episode went by in its usual manner, with the sole exception of Smolder's hesitation to stay behind to be with Gallus. The episode then ended on its rather happy note, with everybody cleaning up the rest of the messes and everything, and the final lesson at the end playing out as normal. And then after that, the episode pretty much was done. Even watching that scene over and over and over again in my mind, I kinda understand now why the scene wasn't included. The fire and everything else. But even then, it was still a nice build of character for Gallus, who knows, maybe one day the scene might be addressed in future episodes. At least, well, at least probably in Season 9 or something like that. Who's to say? I mean, Season 9 is the last season of the show, sadly. Perhaps it might be featured in another episode. Toned down, at least. Regardless of whatever decision Hasbro may take, it only helped me further my liking towards Gallus. And even now it still makes me tear up whenever I think about the horrible tragedy that poor Griffin had to go through with losing his parents on that one holiday that should have been the best for him.
In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave. Glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping horror-driven nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.